Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So, inshallah ta'ala, this will be a translation of um, the lesson with Sheikh Nader from the point wherein I had to leave from the lesson, uh, not this past lesson, but the lesson before that. I'm going to complete the translation of that lesson and get through as much as we can of the translation from the lesson that we just had on this past Saturday. So, in relation to where we left off in the translation from two classes ago, the class before last, we pick up from the point wherein Sheikh Nader, he said, Hafidhahullah wa Raha, that we're going to begin this book by way of studying the chain of narration. We're studying the chain of narration. So, what is the chain of narration for this book? Meaning for the book Usool by Imam Ahmed alayhi rahmatullah. The Sheikh, he says that he began by mentioning a Sheikh al-Imam Abu Muzaffar Abdul Malik ibn Ali ibn Muhammad al-Hamdani said that a Sheikh Abu Abdullah Yahya ibn Abi al-Hasan ibn al-Banna said that my father Abu Ali al-Hasan ibn Ahmad ibn Abdullah ibn al-Banna narrated to us saying, Abu al-Hussein Ali ibn Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Bishran al-Mu'addal narrated to us saying, Uthman ibn Ahmad ibn Sammak narrated to us saying, Abu Muhammad al-Hasan ibn Abdul Wahhab ibn Abil Anbar narrated to us in that which he read from his book in the month of Rabi al-Awwal in the year 293 after the Hijrah, which stated that Abu Ja'far Muhammad ibn Sulaiman al-Minqari al-Basri narrated to us in Tunis, saying Abdus ibn Malik al-Attar narrated to us, saying, I heard Abu Abdullah Ahmed ibn Muhammad ibn Hanbal say, the foundational principles of the Sunnah according to us are. So this is the chain of narration that he cited. And he said thereafter that this is that which was mentioned by, or this was what was mentioned in relation to the chain of narration of this book. So who? Now, he says, so this is the Isnad. This is the Isnad. The people of knowledge, thereafter they have mentioned that this is the chain of narration of this book. So they begin by way of narrating it all the way up to leading to Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal, as we have heard. He says that, and so the Isnad is a part of our religion. It is that which connects us to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam all the way up until Allah Ta'ala inherits the earth. This is a part and parcel of our religion. And what is the point of the chain of narration or the Isnad? He said the point of it is that it gives ease to the hearts of the people that whatever we have a chain of narration tracing it, being able to trace it back to the Messenger of Allah alayhi salam. And this is the affair from the time in which the Messenger of Allah alayhi salam was upon the earth all the way until Allah Ta'ala inherits the earth and all that are upon it. And from the examples of that is the statement of the Messenger of Allah alayhi salam, which he said, there will not cease to be a group of my ummah, zahirin, successful and uppermost upon the truth. They will not be harmed by those who oppose them, nor by those who abandon them, all the way up until the hour is established while they are upon that way. He said, if we reflect upon this hadith of the Messenger of Allah alayhi and we look at the affair of this ummah, you find that there is always a group in each and every time frame that are that bear these characteristics. They are successful, they are uppermost, they are upright upon the truth, and they take from the group that came before them and the generation that were before them that were upon a similar methodology and so on and so forth until they reach the Messenger of Allah alayhi salam, like this. He says, and so This means that one group of scholars, they take from another group of scholars who are similar to themselves all the way up until they reach by way of that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, and so this chain of narration, these chains of narration, they are that which connects us to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is the affair all the way up until the day of judgment. He says, and we see, as has come in the authentic narration, that there's going concerning that individual who's going to come out and confront a Dajjal. And this individual who was going to be killed and murdered by a Dajjal, and he's the best martyr. He will come out to confront a Dajjal. And what is he going to say to Dajjal? He's going to say to him, "You are the Dajjal who the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam informed us about." And how did this information reach them about the Messenger of Allah alayhi wasallam saying or speaking about a Dajjal when there are many generations between him and the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? How did the information reach them? By way of the chain of narration leading back to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says that, and so this sanad, the chain of narration, is that which connects us to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But this hadith, it comes in the two sahihs. So therefore, you find that Imam al-Bukhari, rahmatullah alayh, he transmitted this report from his sheikh, meaning his teacher. And the sheikh of al-Bukhari took it from his teacher all the way up until it reached the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So we have this chain of narration leading us from al-Bukhari to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And this particular chain of narration, it is a rare type of chain of narration for this particular hadith. For al-Bukhari narrated it from his sheikh, who narrated from a tabi'i, who narrated it from a companion, who narrated it from the Prophet, alayhi as-salatu was-salam. And so these types of narrations, there are about 23 of them in totality, wherein there are only 3 people between al-Bukhari and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said you have other types of ahadith wherein there are 4 narrators between him and the Prophet, or there are 5, some where there are 9 narrators in between him and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sometimes they're like this, sometimes they're like that. He says, but whatever the case may be, in every time frame we have a group. From a group that are successful, they're upright, they're uppermost upon the truth. And this group, they are connected to the group that came before them that bear similar characteristics, all the way up until they reach the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is the affair up until Allah Ta'ala inherits the earth and all who are upon it. So we, meaning this ummah, is the ummah of the isnad. This ummah is the ummah of the isnad. And the isnad is from their religion. And were it not for the isnad, were it not for the chains of narrations, that anybody can come along and say whatever it is they wish to say about the religion. He says, so this is our deen. He says, and it is not the case that it is only as it relates to a hadith. Now he says, but rather even the speech of Imam Ahmed rahmatullah alayh has an isnad. He says, and so by way of that, a person cannot simply just come along and say, well, Imam Ahmed did not say what you are saying that he said. He says, rather, we have an isnad connecting us to Imam Ahmed, by way of which we are able to verify and affirm that this is exactly what Imam Ahmed rahimahullah has stated. So let's look at and examine the men who are in the chain of narration and see exactly who these men are. Now, so in relation to the men that are mentioned in the chain of narration, so what was mentioned firstly is the Sheikh, the Imam Abu Muzaffar Abdul Malik ibn Ali ibn Muhammad al-Hamdani. Now, and he is from the people of Hamdan. He's from the people of Hamdan. And he said, now, so he just mentioned that. So what is the benefit, or the Sheikh, he said, what is the benefit of knowing who are these men? The benefit in that is knowing that these men, these are from the people of Hadith. So we know, for example, who is Muhammad ibn al-Muthanna, or we know, for example, who is al-Humaydi, or we know, for example, who is Abu Bakr ibn Abi Shayba. He says, what is the benefit in knowing them? That they are the men who narrated to us the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, and so the Sunnah does not come to us in some haphazard manner, such that we take whatever comes to us. If it is attributed to the Messenger of Allah, then we're going to accept it without question. But rather, the Sunnah, it comes to us in an organized and in a structured manner, so that mathalan, the Prophet alayhi, he made statements that were heard by his companions, and they narrated those statements to the tabi'een, who narrated those statements to those who came after them, by way of these golden chains of narrations, so that we have an isnad connecting us to the speech of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, and so this is how the affair is. That it is an affair of a talaqi, an affair of transmission one from another, up until it reaches the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so he mentioned, firstly, you have Abdul Malik ibn Abi, or Naam. He says we have this great Imam, Abdul Malik ibn Ali ibn Muhammad al-Hamdani. Naam. And he mentioned its chain of narration, going back to, or that he narrated from Sheikh Abu Abdullah Yahya ibn Abi al-Hasan ibn al-Banna. He says that, and so this great Imam, Abdul Malik ibn Abi Muzaffar, he is al-Bazzar from Hamdan, and he's an eminent sheikh. He died in the year 52 after the Hijrah. He died in the year 52 after the Hijrah. And he was a sheikh who was truthful, and he was upright, 552 after the Hijrah. 552 after the Hijrah. He says, and so if we look into the books of the other nations, from the Jews and the Christians, for example, and that which they narrate from their prophets, if you were to ask them, where did you get this narration from? How do you know that Isa actually said what you're saying that he said? And the likes of this, then they don't know. They don't have a clue. They just simply have a narration with them with no chain, by way of which they can trace it back to Isa alayhi salam. He says, and so we are not like that. Rather, our nation is such that we have a chain of narration leading back to the Messenger of Allah alayhi salam. And we are able to, we know the biographies of each individual who is inside of that chain. We know what the individual had of knowledge. We know what he had of tazkiyat, who recommended him from the scholars. And we have much details regarding his seerah. And so, this is the affair of our ummah. Our ummah, as we mentioned, is the ummah of the isnad. And so our deen is based upon it. Our deen is based upon it. And whereas these individuals, you ask them, where did you get this from? How can you affirm it from that particular prophet? They are not able to give you any information regarding their narrators and the likes of this. And what is it that proves that this deen, a part of it is the isnad? We have the statement of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, that whenever fasiq comes to you with some information, if he comes to you with some information, then verify the information. And another recitation of the verse, then affirm that information actually is an authentic report. And how is it that you're able to affirm that? By way of the isnad. By way of the isnad. Meaning that a trustworthy person, if you were to look at the information and you find that it comes from someone who's thiqah, he narrated it from someone else who was thiqah, trustworthy and likes of that, then we accept that narration. But if it is said concerning the narrator of that information, if it is said concerning him that so-and-so is a person of poor memory, is a person who does not preserve that which he has heard and the likes of that, then we are not going to accept, that transmission. So thus, our religion does not come to us by way of some haphazard or chaotic method. Rather, we are able to affirm the narrations that reach us from the Messenger of Allah alayhi salam, or other than him. So if it is said, for example, that the Messenger of Allah alayhi salam, he says such and such, then we question a person who says that. Where did you hear that at? How did you hear it? If he has and something which is authentic, leading back to the Messenger of Allah alayhi salam, then we're going to accept it. If there is, if he does not have that, then we don't accept that. He says, no. So an individual, he may come narrating a hadith, and there are some 200 or so years between this person and the one that he's narrating from. So we're going to ask him, we're going to question him, who are you narrating this from? How has this information reached you? And if he has an authentic source to trace it back to, then this is one thing. If he does not have the authentic source to trace that back to, then we're not going to accept that. And this is the difference between our ummah and the other nations. He says, and so this has been stated, or similar that's been stated by one of the Western writers who wrote about al-Islam. And he said that the Muslims, they are able to boast and brag about their asanid, about their chains of narration. They have chains of narrations by way of which they're able to verify and trace the information from their prophet. He says, and so we can boast about this affair, about the asanid and the chains of narration. We have chains of narration that connect us to the Messenger of Allah alayhi salam, or to the speech of our scholars. He says, and so we look at what we have with us here in front of us. We have detailed biographies of these individuals who came in the chain of Usool-Sunnah. And by way of this, it becomes known to us that we can trust and we can be at ease as it relates to this transmission. Thus, we are able to see the importance of what we are reading. So he mentioned that he narrated from Sheikh Abu Abdullah Yahya ibn Abil Hassan ibn Banna. And he is specific concerning him. He is Yahya ibn al-Hassan ibn Ahmed al-Banna al-Baghdadi al-Hanbali. And he was a person who possessed knowledge and righteousness. And he narrated from a large group of the people of knowledge. Amongst them is his father. And amongst them as well, or often a group of the scholars, likewise narrated from him. From them is Al-Hafiz ibn Asakir, likewise ibn Sam'ani. He narrated from him a large amount. He says, and it's been stated, often, he says that, no, like this, we're able to see how trustworthy this individual is. So this tazkiyah that we have from him, it did not come from only one scholar. Rather, a large group of scholars narrated from him. Ibn Asakir said concerning him that he was a sheikh that was salih, he was righteous. He was Hasan as-Sira. He had a good upbringing, and he narrated a large amount, and he had great character and manners. He was precise, he was humble, he was righteous, and he was kind to the students of knowledge, and he was gentle towards them. Similar has been stated from Ibn al-Imad within his book, Ash-Shabarat. There was a book by Ibn Imad called Ash-Shabarat. He says, he narrated that my father, Abu Ali al-Hasan ibn Ahmed ibn Abdullah ibn Banna, narrated to me. And his father, he was Abu Ali al-Hasan ibn Ahmed ibn Abdullah al-Hanbali. He as well was Baghdadi. And he was one who used to read abundantly. And he was one who narrated abundantly. He was a faqih, he had fiqh. He was one who abstained from the dunya. He was a wa'id, he was an admonisher. He was a person who authored many works. And he heard hadith from a large group of scholars, from him Al-Qadi Abu Ya'la Al-Hanbali. And he was amongst the eminent students and companions of him. And he took a large amount of knowledge from him. Al-Dhahabi said that he was an Imam. He was an alim, a scholar. He was one who was qualified to issue fatwa. And he was a muhaddith, a narrator of hadith, a scholar of hadith. Ibn Shafi', he said that he was one of pure character. and he had a handsome face, and he had gray hair, and he was one who loved the people of knowledge, and he honored them. He had good manners, and he was stern against the people of desires. And similar has been mentioned from Ibn Imad, as has come in the book Tabaqat al-Hanabila, as well as in the book Si'alam al-Nubala. He says, so look, so we have this tazkiyah for him. And this tazkiyah didn't simply come from one scholar, rather it came from a large number of scholars. We have 4 scholars here. From them, that was what was mentioned by Dhahabi within Si'alam al-Nubala. You had that which was mentioned within the book Tabaqat al-Hanabila. You had that which was stated by Ibn Shafi', as well as that which we got other speech that we have from Dhahabi. So look at how they praised him and spoke well about him. He says, so if you were asked about the speech of the scholar, then you can say, or if you were to ask about the speech of the scholars regarding this man, then you can say that this is what the ulama have stated concerning him. He went on to say that Abu Hussein narrated to us, and it's Abu Hussein Ali ibn Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Bishran al-Mu'addal. And he was Abu Hussein Ali ibn Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Bishran ibn Muhammad al-Umawi al-Baghdadi al-Mu'addal. Al-Khatib said concerning him, and this is from amongst the scholars of Hadith, Khatib al-Baghdadi, that he was Suduq, he was a person who was truthful, and he was firm, and he had a manly type of dignity about himself. And he was one who outwardly displayed his religiosity was something that was apparent. And Dhahabi, he said that he was a sheikh, he was an alim, a scholar. He was one who was just, and he was musnid, meaning that anytime he would narrate, he would bring the chains of narrations for whatever he narrated. And he narrated a large amount from Sadad, or Afwan, he narrated a large amount upon with precision and truthfulness, and he was someone who he was precise in what he narrated, and he only narrated that which was authentically reported. He was just and dignified. He said, now, and this is what was mentioned inside of As-Siyar. He said that Uthman ibn Ahmed ibn Sammak narrated to us, stating, and this is Abu Amr, Uthman ibn Ahmed ibn Abdullah ibn Yazid al-Duqqaq. He was well known as Ibn Sammak al-Baghdadi. And he heard from a large group of ulama. Amongst those whom he heard from was Ismail ibn Ishaq al-Qadi. And Ad-Daraqutni likewise reported and narrated a hadith from him. He said that our Sheikh Abu Amr wrote regarding, or he wrote that which he narrated from Taridi and those who were after him. And he wrote several books that were long, several many volumed books. He wrote them out by way of his hand. He wrote them out by hand. And he was amongst those who were trustworthy narrators. And Ibn Shaheen and Ibn Mundhir and those other scholars who were his contemporaries all narrated from him. Meaning that these are those who narrated from him, and they are from, he was an individual who has teachers, and he was not one who just simply made up things and narrated from himself. Rather, there were others who heard and narrated from him. Some of them were on his level, they were his contemporaries, and others amongst them, they were those who they were his teachers. He said that, and Al-Khatib said concerning him that he was thiqa, he was trustworthy, he was truthful, and he his body was prepared, meaning that he passed away and he died on Friday. And his body was prayed over by a large group consisting of about 5,000 or so people. The Shaykh, he says that, meaning that he considered this to be a good ending, because some of the scholars have stated that death on the night of Jumu'ah or on Jumu'ah itself is a sign of a good ending. He went on to say that Abu Muhammad al-Hasan ibn Abdul Wahhab ibn Abil Anbar narrated to us, and he is Abu Muhammad al-Hasan ibn Abdul Wahhab ibn Abil Anbar al-Baghdadi. He narrated from a large group of scholars. Amongst them is Muhammad ibn Sulaiman al-Minqari al-Basri. And likewise, Abu Amr ibn Samad narrated from him. Al-Khatib, meaning al-Baghdadi, said concerning him, now, he said concerning him that he was trustworthy and he was well known for goodness and as sunnah. And what does he mean by he was known for the sunnah? He was known for having sound aqidah. He was known for having sound belief. And we're going to see when we discuss the meaning of as-sunnah later in the book, what is intended by the term sunnah. And what is intended by way of that is aqidah. And it is aqidah, as we see in the title of this book, Usool Sunnah. And we're studying matters of aqidah and creed. He says that. Now, he went on to mention that Abu Muhammad al-Hasan ibn Abdul Wahhab ibn Abil Anbar narrated to us, and that which he read upon him from his book, meaning in the month of Rabi al-Awwal, in the year 293, stating that Abu Ja'far Muhammad ibn Sulaiman al-Minqari al-Basri narrated to us. And this Muhammad ibn Sulaiman ibn Dawood ibn or Abu Ja'far al-Minqari, and his biography was written by Ibn Asakir, and that which he narrated from a large group of trustworthy individuals. And he narrated this in Tunis, meaning that Abu Ja'far ibn Ahmed ibn Sulaiman al-Minqari al-Basri, he narrated this in a place called Tunis. And Tunis is written with two kasras, meaning a kasra upon the ba, a kasra upon the noon. Like this, he says, and the Shaykh, he spoke at length regarding the importance of precision in the way that these words are pronounced, because the way that they used to write at one point in time, they didn't use the diacritical marks that we have upon the letters today. And so one had to distinguish between the letters. And the Shaykh, he mentioned how they used to write at one time with a feather that they would dip into ink, and they would write the letters. And if a person was not careful, then you would write a Ra, for example. And if a dot was placed above the Ra, you turn the Ra into what? A Zay. And so they would be very, very careful in that which they wrote. Now, and they would put these types of words inside of the text in the manuscript so that you know what goes on each letter, because they would write without those dots and things like that. So they would write inside of their works like this, bikasratayni wa tashdid an-nun. They would add these words inside of their writings so that the reader knows what vowel markings go where and what the words actually are, so that you have precision in that which you are reading and that which you're narrating. And all of this is from the amana ilmiya, that amana, the trustworthiness as in conveying that which one is conveying of knowledge. He says, and so he did this in Tunis. In Tunis, this was a jazira, it was like a type of peninsula that was close to Egypt, or it was within Egypt. He says, and so Tunis, he says that it was a place that the scholars would frequent. Many scholars would frequent this place, and it was in Egypt, alhamdulillah. He says, so our land, yani Misr, it was a place that the ulama would come to. Even al-Bukhari, he visited Egypt due to the fact that scholars of hadith were present there. He says, and so many scholars of hadith would come there and frequent it. Al-Bukhari, he actually narrated from a Damascus man who lived in Tunis at the time, and the Shaykh, he mentions that I can't recall his name, who Al-Bukhari would narrate from, but he was Damascus, and he lived in Tunis, which is in Egypt. He says, so the scholars, they would frequent this place due to the abundance of ulama of hadith that was there. And from the bounty of Allah Ta'ala upon Egypt, the scholars and the students of knowledge, they would come from all over to learn and to hear about the sunnah, hadith of the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah, alayhi as-salatu wasalam. He says, so he went on to mention that he narrated this in Tunis, which was in Egypt. It was a village in Egypt. He says that. Now, he went on to say that حدثني عبدوس ibn Malik al-Attar. And this is Abdus ibn Malik al-Attar. Abu Bakr al-Khalas said that he had with Abu Abdullah a great status, meaning Ahmed ibn Hanbal. Meaning that Abdus ibn Malik al-Attar had great status with Imam Ahmed. He says that, and he would give him gifts, and other than that, and he had close companionship with him. And Imam Ahmed, he loved him much, and he had great status with him. Now, such that to speak at length regarding the closeness of their relationship, it would take quite some time. Abu Ya'la, he said that Abu Abdullah narrated from Abu Abdullah, meaning Ahmed ibn Hanbal, that which other than him did not narrate. He says, and from that, he mentions is that which he narrated from Imam Ahmed regarding the affairs of creed, meaning this book that we're studying now, Usool, that this is amongst those things which Abdus ibn Malik al-Attar narrated from Imam Ahmed, that none other than him narrated from Imam Ahmed. It shows you the closeness which he had with Imam Ahmed, that he would get things from him, but nobody else got from him. Now, he says that, and he narrated from him, that which, if a person were to travel to China to get it, that trip that he made to China would be a small price to pay to get something so magnificent. Likewise, Ibn al-Jawzi, he mentioned in Manaqib al-Imam Ahmed in chapter 100, in the mention of certain individuals amongst his companions and his students that were from his time up until our time. He says that he mentioned a large group of people from the first generation, and there are those who accompanied Imam Ahmed and who transmitted narration from him. And then he mentioned them, at the head of them was Abdus. The head of them was Abdus. And he said, Abdus ibn Malik, Abu Muhammad al-Attar, he narrated from Imam Ahmed, as well as his contemporaries. He narrated as well from Yahya ibn Ma'in, and he had a great status with Imam Ahmed. And the evidence for his status, which he had with Imam Ahmed, is that Imam Ahmed, he gave him something. He gave him something which he had compiled on the issues of Abwab al-Sunnah, meaning on the issues of the creed. He says that, such that if a person were to travel to China to seek it out, that trip that he took to China, it would be a small price to pay for that which he had gotten from him. He says, and he's speaking again in reference to this book that we're studying now. He says, so what does this do for you when you hear the likes of this chain of narration? He says that it makes your heart to be at ease regarding that which you are reading and that which you're studying, that it is affirmed from Imam Ahmed alayhi rahmatullah. So if someone comes to you trying to sow doubt, then you can say, get away from me. You can say, get away from me, go somewhere. He says, because we trust in that which we are reading. And we have a chain of narration that is sound, and we know each individual in its chain of narration leading us back to Imam Ahmed alayhi rahmatullah. So Imam Ahmed, he loved Abdus much. And from the signs of his love for him, that he gave him this book. He gave him this book, Usool. And so we're going to suffice with this amount this evening. But we see from this the importance of the Isnad. And the Isnad is such that, as Abdullah ibn Mubarak, he said, the Isnad is from the Deen. It is from our religion. And were it not for the Isnad, then anybody could make up anything they wanted and say anything about their religion that they wanted to. And We'll suffice with this amount as it relates to that lesson, and Allah Ta'ala knows best. Much time. I'm afraid that we don't have time to go into the second translation, as I have a class about a start that I have to get to. So we'll inshallah ta'ala finish the translation from the last lesson tomorrow or sometime soon, inshallah ta'ala. Perhaps tomorrow we'll do it at the same time. We'll finish. We'll be all caught up by the time with where we are. Allah knows best. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.